Alright, everybody, welcome into another episode of the Full Press Saints podcast, of course, part of the Full Press Coverage Network. What is going on? It is Alec here today. No Dayton, but I have made sure to bring in a very, very special guest. He will help us preview this game this weekend between the New England Patriots, and he is one of the best out there, not only for your Saints news, but also just one of the best people out there in this world. Ross Jackson, you can follow him on Twitter at Ross Jackson Nola. Ross, thank you for coming on today, man. How have you been? It's been a while since we've been on one of these things.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to chop it up in a minute, but I'll tell you what, I felt one way before that introduction, which was still very good, and then that introduction happened, and now I feel even better. So I appreciate you, man.
Yeah, no, here with you. Of course, there are true words from the bottom of my black and gold heart.
Oh, your heart. Okay.
Yeah,
great.
I was trying to find a word to describe the game between the Panthers and how I was feeling, but it just couldn't. It didn't come at the right moment. So
black and blue heart, maybe, because it's bruised. Because that was rough.
Yeah. I don't know what's rough. That game, or seeing the photoshopped pictures of Andrews Pete in the drains and gutters in New Orleans.
Listen, I'm not here to indulge in the Andrews Pete slander. It's low hanging fruit. Slow hanging fruit.
No, I mean,
it's been done already.
We've been on the Andrews Pete trade since the deal came out. I mean, it's just, you can't do better than Andrews Pete on the market. I mean, hey, it is what it is, right?
Make work with what you got, man. And, look, they were in a really unique circumstance as well. His performance from week 1 to week 2 was the same trajectory as everyone's performance in the offensive line from week 1 to week 2. So,
yeah.
Is what it is.
Yeah, it's a rough game, rough week for Saints fans, but nonetheless, we're moving on to next week. They will travel to New England, and more importantly, this will be their last week here in Dallas. So they'll be practicing, I believe, Thursday, Friday at AT&T, correct? And then flying to New England.
Yeah, I think they're actually done. I think they're headed to New England early. I think they just had their last day in Dallas, if I'm remembering correctly. I could be very wrong. They might have one more day there. But either way, it's all coming to an end very quickly, and then they're going to be headed to New England a little bit early this week, get settled, get ready for that game, and then they're back to the intent is to be back to New Orleans after that game.
As long as there are no more fires on the roof.
God. As long as there are no more fires on the roof.
I can't even summarize this offseason and this season so far. It's just bizarre. The things that have happened to this team, and, that doesn't happen to NFL teams. The things that the Saints have been through, this offseason and first 2 weeks, the highs and the lows of how quickly they've came, you don't see that happen ever. So, look, today was a very positive day for the Saints, however, with the first injury report coming out. Several key guys returned to practice in a limited capacity, including Johnson Gardner-Johnson, Marshawn Lattimore, Pete Werner. Pay Turner was actually added to the injury report with a elbow injury, but we'll wait to see how that looks. And Tejano.
Tano Passanio.
You were waiting for that, weren't you?
No, I. It has been so long since we've gotten to do this that I forgot about the your name thing,
the Anzalone thing, right? It took me so long to get Anzalone right, and now he's a line now, of course. But Tano is back to a full participant with a calf injury, which is why he was out last week. So, Ross, just the general feeling of this injury report, how much more positive are you feeling about this team heading into this week against New England?
I am personally feeling much better about this injury report than what happened last week and what we saw there. Eric McCoy being, out for practice is effectively what you should have expected. Yeah, at this point, because the expectation from what I've seen people estimate is 5 to 6 weeks for him. We'll see how true that actually is. Hopefully he's back sooner. The fact that he's not on injured reserve still is good news, because it could mean the Saints expect him back within the next couple of weeks, but we kind of have to wait and see what happens. But yeah, so should have expected that when it comes to Eric McCoy, but when it comes to Marshawn Lattimore, CJ Gardner-Johnson, seeing Tano Passanio back in full, these other guys that are these other guys that are limited, it's good news for New Orleans. The ones that probably stress you out a little bit are Peyton Turner, who had a really great debut. Even though he had the early roughing the passer penalty, he didn't let that get under his skin. He still had a very, very good. You saw the the multitude of pass rushing moves, the myriad of pass rushing moves that he has available to him, his tenacity, his ability to transition speed to power, bull rush, all these things that he does very well. So he had all of that there. He was very exciting to watch. So you want to see him back on the field this week. You don't want to see him swap out with Tano Passenger. You want both of those guys available for you. And then the other one would be Calvin Throckmorton. Just because you already have so much going on the offensive line and it's not getting healthier anytime soon, you don't want to add to the issues there.
He's been a very pleasant surprise so far playing on guard. I know you and Dylan are both very adamant for the drafting of Calvin Throckmorton, and it didn't happen, but he's a set nonetheless. So he's been a very pleasant surprise, filling in for, of course, Cesar Ruiz, who was filling in for Eric McCoy. And I mean, with Pete Warner, I think that's intriguing to me because if I'm correct, and I could easily be wrong, but we have not seen much of Pete Warner, in full-time game situations. Go back to preseason, go back to weeks 1 and 2. So,
yeah, I'll do you one better. We haven't seen him, period.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Yeah, when it comes to full game stuff, because he got injured. It was like August 9th, August 10th, and then after that, we just kind of didn't see him at all throughout the preseason, and then all of a sudden you ended up getting into that. Now that I say that, I'm starting to remember a number 20 on the field, so maybe I'm conflating his injury with Peyton Turner. So perhaps we saw him against the Jaguars, but I can't remember now. So now I'm a little self-conscious about what I said, but screw it. Doesn't matter. Sometimes you mess up. But when it comes down to it, you haven't seen him a bunch at all. We haven't seen him at all this season, most importantly. So that would be somebody that you would love to get back, because Zach Bond, struggled a little bit where he was that top will linebacker next to Demario Davis. So you'd like to see maybe Pete Werner, who many of us had ahead of Zach Bond throughout the offseason, may potentially step in and get that opportunity.
Yeah, and I think this is going to be a big test for this linebacking group. Talk about the Patriots, of course. Let's take a look at the Saints defense. Good Lord. It's Teddy Fourpaws. Got him a little Bronco Bridgewater jersey now, so I'm hyped about that.
Love it.
So, Ross, let's take a look at this Patriot offense. Talk about Mac Jones, the rookie quarterback, who has looked just about as you would expect for a rookie quarterback to play under Bill Belichick, if that makes any sense. Obviously, this offense has weapons. Nelson Aguilar, Hunter Henry, Jonnu Smith, of course, the tight ends, which, as we know, the Patriots love to use tight ends. And last week, the Saints team, the Dan Arnold revenge game was very much a thing.
Oh, man. Yeah.
And Zach Bond, of course, was the victim, if you will, in this equation here. So how do you think this defense matches up? If you get Lattimore back, you can get Chauncey Gardner-Johnson back, you get P. Warner in the mix. How do you think this team matches up to this new-looking, younger Patriot offense?
It might sound weird, but I think the most important piece to get back over on the defensive side when it comes to coverage is C.J. Gardner-Johnson. I think that he gives you the aggression, the tenacity, everything that you kind of missed, the physicality, everything you really didn't have against Carolina, or at least was in short supply to begin the game in Carolina. C.J. Gardner-Johnson was apparently supposed to play a large role in the game plan in terms of matching up with Christian McCaffrey. So not only did you take that from a guy that can play up against the line of scrimmage and then you moved it back to the second level, you also took that and moved it away from somebody that has experience in coverage to someone that's learning to play a coverage position. Because we should still remember that Zach Bond is still transitioning into learning how to be a coverage linebacker, and his introduction to it was Christian McCaffrey. Not ideal. So I think that C.J. Gardner-Johnson coming back, particularly the matchups with those tight ends that you named, as well as James White out of the backfield and some of these running backs out of the backfield that can get mixed in, or Sony Michel probably, that can get mixed into all of that. I think that C.J. really gives you what you need and what you missed last week going up against a talented offense that has some unique weapons.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think it makes a lot of sense on paper if you have Chauncey Gardner-Johnson lined up against McCaffrey, in the nickel. And, even if you have him playing, quote, linebacker in, sub-nickel packages. So I think for me, this is all about getting pressure on Mac Jones, make him uncomfortable. And that also was missed last week. And I'll have to say, the one guy who stood out to me week 1 against the Packers was, Tano
Passenger.
Yes, he got some key pressures against Billy Turner on Aaron Rodgers early and often in that week 1 game. And Peyton Turner looked phenomenal for a rookie, I might add. That was the one out of the 2 bright spots. I love the safety play from Malcolm Jenkins and Marcus Williams against the Panthers, but Payne Turner, he looked good for a rook. Couple pressures, a sack, and I mean, we have Payne Turner, and then you include Pete Warner, Paulson and Debo, the rookie. How important is it, do you think, for these rookies to get in the starting lineup early and often and make an impact for this Saints defense?
I think that there's arguments to be made for sooner rather than later, but the way that I've always seen in the NFL is that if you're going to be good, you're going to be good. Like there's always kind of in the argument about, should quarterbacks sit their rookie year versus should they start their rookie year? And the research shows it doesn't really matter. If a quarterback's going to be good, they're going to be good. So I feel the same way when it comes to these rookies. I was a little bit behind on the idea, a little bit reserved on the idea of Paulson Adebo getting out on the field early because he didn't play college football in 2020. The last time we saw him in 2019, he was dealing with an ankle injury and his confidence was a little low. He got kind of attacked quite a bit at the UCF game and all these other things. And so it just didn't feel like it was advantageous, in my opinion, at that time to throw him into the mix out of necessity, as opposed to him giving them no choice but to play him as a starter, like taking that role and not letting it go. But playing him out of necessity was less than ideal, in my opinion, when you were going up against Aaron Rodgers. Now, I was a million times wrong about that because then he got out in that game and he played fantastic against Aaron Rodgers and the Green Bay Packers. I thought that he played well down the stretch of the Carolina game, but he got attacked early. He gave up 9 catches on 11 targets for 90 yards and a touchdown. So he was busy and he was, worked on often. There was also one play where he kind of let up because he thought Sam Darnold was going to get sacked. And so, those are the types of things that you don't want to see. Peyton Turner, on the other hand, I am all about getting him out there as quickly as possible because he's not a project, even though a lot of people labeled him as that. He's a more refined pass rusher than most quote-unquote projects are coming into the NFL. So I like the idea of him coming out and having an opportunity to develop. That means that both these guys are going to have ups, they're going to have downs. When they have downs, people are going to want them benched. When they have ups, they're going to be rookies of the year. But the fact of the matter is that for Peyton Turner, I think he has the tools necessary to say, okay, go out there and develop in real time. Paulson Adebo, I thought they could have given him a little bit more time, but out of necessity, they needed him out on the field immediately, and I think that he showed up when they asked him to do that.
You're like the voice of reason among everyone.
I try.
You restore optimism to all of us.
I try very hard to make sure that I'm looking at things the way that I understand the team would be looking at it. That's what I want to do. Like, I think that every team is interested in developing talent, but you have to individualize development. You can't give it a blanket expectation over the course of all of it. And it's one of the reasons why I love what Sean Payton and this coaching staff have always done, which is that they never put a ceiling on a player, but then they never affix unreasonable expectations to those players at the same time. They've always been very much, this is what our expectation is and what our vision is for the player. It's always about vision, which can be right now, it can be later, it can be whatever. And it's one of the reasons why the Saints, the 2 players that they missed the most on Sunday in that loss to Green Bay, in that loss to Carolina, were 2 players that were drafted in 2019. That's how quickly these players become integral to the success of the team. Those 2 players, by the way, being Eric McCoy on the offensive side, which we'll talk about in a moment, and then C.J. Gardner-Johnson on the defensive side, who was supposed to be a huge part of the game plan in limiting Christian McCaffrey. Mm-hmm. So that just goes to show you how quickly they develop these players when they were drafted first round, second round, fourth round in C.J. Gardner-Johnson's case, which is still wild to me. It's one of the reasons why I love covering this team, because of the way that they approach player development in a way that I think is really constructive. And so I try to think about it with that same approach.
So let me ask you this then. If you're thinking about the way the Saints do ideally, we're not adding a wide receiver this year, are we?
I wouldn't hold my breath for it. I mean, I tell people that all the time. Yeah. And like that's the thing, is I wouldn't hold my breath for it. Sean Payton is very, and the other part of it too is that they did. Like they just added Kenny Stills last week. They went so far to address the wide receiver position that they brought back somebody that I thought would never be on this team ever again. after the way that everything went down with Drew Brees and all this other stuff. Like people asked me at the beginning of the season, do you think that Kenny Stills is a viable option as a free agent? And I was like, nah. Probably not.
it was the last thing when we all saw the report, we were like, okay, he worked out. There's no way they signed him, right? Like, this is not going to happen.
I was ready for Marquise Lee time. Like, I've been wanting Marquise Lee in New Orleans for like 3 years.
We've been on the Philip Dorsett train since the New England days. Right. But so let's talk about this offense real quick, Ross. Obviously, Eric McCoy being out, which was something we expected when this injury report came out. This offensive line, which I think to me I think we all agree is the strong point of this offense. It's easily the best equipped when it comes to the starting lineup, the backups, and whatnot. So, to see this group struggle as bad as they did against what is still a very good front seven of the Carolina Panthers, give the Panthers credit where it's due. How do you feel about the Saints' offensive line matching up with a robust, reformed Patriot defense with Matt Judon? They brought back Kyle Van Noy. They had Dante Hightower back from last year when he sat out with COVID. How do you feel about this front five for the Saints matching up with this front seven of the Patriots?
Yeah, I think, you saw historically in terms of the pressure rate statistic, which has only been tracked for, a handful of years or so, or a couple handfuls of years, I guess you could say. The Saints put up a top 3 worst performance in terms of pressure rate allowed. Over 64% of Jameis Winston's dropbacks were under pressure.
It's not good.
Not good. Yep. But hard to get worse. So one of the things that I look at when it comes from this is what were the extenuating circumstances that the Saints were subject to last week, and how are they different this week? Now, you didn't have an offensive line coach throughout the week. Now, he was on, probably on WebEx and,
Zoom
video conferencing in. And you know what I mean? So it's not like he was completely absent. But big deal to not have that presence in the facility all week and then not have Dan Rauscher on the sideline.
To make adjustments and whatnot, yeah.
Right. And so I put a lot on that, not as an excuse, but just as something that might help self-correct what's happening going into the next game. As Mike Detillier mentioned and astutely pointed out, whenever a team has to replace a center in-game and that new center is the starter the next week, the team almost always loses that next game.
That's a stat.
It's an eerie, weird thing that Mike Detillier was able to pick out.
That's crazy.
It's a weird situation to have to try to combat, right? Because you have, especially when you're also dealing with a first-year quarterback in your system.
Yep.
So there's a lot of things that compounded last week, that I don't think will compound next week. So do I think that the Saints are going to be the best offensive line in the NFL next week? No, because they're going up against Bill Belichick, and no one is the best offensive line against Bill Belichick. But do I think that they improve from last week? I would say there's a high probability of that, if nothing else, based on the fact that it's hard to be worse than you were last week, and it's hard to be in a worse situation than you were last week. Like the circumstances to which they were subject last week should be very different very soon.
Yeah, and I think I would agree with that 100%. I think, communication is key in the NFL on the field, and to not have it's one thing to have your coach during the week, as you said, on a monitor talking to the guys in the room or whatever. That's one thing, but then to go to the sidelines, because as an offensive lineman, the first thing you do is go to the bench, and then your coach comes over and tells you, "Hey, this is what we need to do. This is how we need to fix this." Yada yada yada. You didn't have that last week. And as you mentioned, with Reeves being the new center this week, full-time starting center, and then have Winston, who his first year in the system. Not to mention, people seem to compare everything Breeze has done in this offense to what Jameis Winston has done, and that's just unfair, so many levels. But I think the big national media talking point I've seen a lot of these shows has old Jameis returned, based on and I saw one. It was a First Take, or was it what's the one with Nick Wright on it? First Things First?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, one of the two shows said one of the talking points was which Jameis Winston interception looked like old Jameis, and I was like, "Come on, really? We're gonna do this right now?"
Right.
I'm not worried about Jameis Winston going forward. I know a lot of people are uneasy about him, but I'm sure you expect a much better rebound game for Winston this week. Correct? Better, it got to be better than last week, right?
Yeah, I mean that's my expectation, and again, I think that the circumstances around Jameis Winston are going to be better. Mm-hmm. He's not going to be in that situation, and so I think that you can see an improved Jameis Winston in this game. But the other part around it or about it is that this is also a very good passing defense and a very good coverage defense. So it's still a barometer by which to measure Jameis Winston's performance, and hopefully a more effective one than what you effectively you'll have trouble evaluating out of last week. Like, what was Jameis versus what was the situation? Now, there were a couple of throws that didn't need to happen, like switching to the left hand and throwing while you're under pressure. Please don't. Throwing a pass, trying to hook it around a player that is actively on you, probably less than ideal. And so I think that you still have the ability to take some stuff from there. And Sean Payton, and this is, again, why I think that player development from Sean Payton and his coaching staff is so important, is because instead of saying, well, you got to risk it for the biscuit like Bruce Arians did, Sean Payton's going to sit him down and say, okay, these are risks we don't want to take, and these are the things that we don't want to do. And that's why I think that the Saints system and support is very different. So now what I'm wondering with Jameis Winston is, can you watch the trajectory of him getting better? Looking at him and saying, this is the old Jameis Winston, based upon last week's performance, and looking at him and saying, do the Saints need to reopen the quarterback competition, is massively premature in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think, and again, I think the big point you mentioned with Bruce Arians hates young quarterbacks. It's just a fact. He had Carson Palmer in Arizona for as long as he did. The only exception to the rule, I think, is Andrew Luck, and I think that's because we all agree Andrew Luck was pro-ready at the moment he got drafted. He knew he didn't need to be coached as hard. Jameis Winston, on the other hand, he needs a little more coaching. And I think Bruce Arians was not ready to deal with that. He said, screw this, I'm going to get Tom Brady. Here we go. So, that's the unique thing about the Saints. You look at Drew Brees, who had question marks when he came to New Orleans. You look at Teddy Bridgewater. He had question marks when he came to New Orleans. Won 5 games in a row. Now a starter in Denver. Can Sean Payton repeat the success with Jameis? I think so. If you look at Taysom Hill. Taysom Hill, it's the same thing. So I have the utmost confidence in this staff to put Jameis in the best position possible to win games. And, I just think last week with all that happened and whatnot, it's rough to go out there and win with the things the Saints had happen to them.
Yeah.
It's just hard. And again, Carolina, I think, is a very nice team. It's a very good roster. They've assembled. Matt Rule's done an amazing job with that team. So it happens.
Yeah.
No reason to freak out. But let's talk about, I think last week a big reason why Winston struggled was the lack of separation by these receivers, the lack of really anybody getting open, whether it was the receivers, the tight ends, whatnot. I mean, we knew Kenny Stills will probably play Sunday. Hopefully, we would imagine that. I mean, what are you expecting from this group of receivers and tight ends? Because I know last week was rough for, a couple guys. I personally was very disappointed in Adam Trautman's performance. Missed a couple of big blocks when he was coming across the other side of the formation. I mean, because this is not the most skilled group in the NFL, right?
Right. Yeah, no, I think that when you look at this wide receiver core and what you're looking for next week is, you're looking for them to get better, because you can't expect. I do think we probably get to see Kenny Stills this week. You look at the restructure of Traquan Smith's contract, which opens up the space to bring Kenny Stills up to the active roster. We'll see if they do that. But I don't think you would be hard pressed to get me to say that adding Kenny Stills to this receiver core makes it a
big
better
difference.
Receiving core. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I think I shouldn't say that it doesn't make it better, but I don't think it makes it a unit without further concern. Like, the unit itself still has to also improve. And I think Kenny Stills is the perfect addition He's a perfect style player that fits with Jameis Winston, that fits with what this offense wants to do, screen passes, shot plays, all these things. He's a very good addition to that, but the unit as a whole has to get better in addition to adding him to it, right? So it's not just on Kenny Stills to somehow make this entire unit better. Marquez Callaway has to be able to make plays. But some of it also comes down to Jameis Winston also has to trust that these receivers can make plays and be able to deliver the ball where they will be able to have the opportunity to make those plays on the ball. Let the receivers make plays as opposed to you feeling like you have to make plays. That's not really a criticism on Jameis Winston. That's just him learning, operating with new receivers, right? Mm-hmm. He has to be able to be comfortable with that the way that you would be comfortable with that if Michael Thomas was on the field. So that becomes a part of it. And then the last piece of that whole puzzle is that if the receivers can win immediately off the line of scrimmage, then the Saints probably would have been a little bit better of a situation last week against Carolina. But the fact that Jameis Winston and the offensive line were, the Panthers defensive line was generating pressure 2.6 seconds after the snap, there's just not a lot that you can do with that because you can't find those open receivers with that kind of pressure in your face, regardless of who you are. So you have to be able to win off the line of scrimmage immediately so that you can back the pass rush off, throw the ball where the blitz is coming from. Issue is, Saints looked like they had no idea where the blitz was coming from. Mm-hmm. So again, these are all things that I expect will self-correct and all come down to the very beginning and root of all of this issue is communication.
Yeah, and I think the big part of, the communication factor is that, the guy before Jameis was here for, 15 years? He knew the offense inside and out. He knew what audibles to make to the line, where to get the receivers at, if they had to shift around or, make audibles. And, the other thing is Sean Payton, he gave Breeze, 3 or 4 plays before each snap and said, hey, whatever they're doing out there, you call whatever you think is best, audible whatever you think you need. Yeah. With Jameis, it's just not there yet.
Right, and Jameis is still getting 2 plays at the line of scrimmage sometimes. But the issue is, so if I wanted, let's say you and I line up, right? Mm-hmm. And we're running this 2-man play, and we want to look around and say, okay, we're going to audible this route. Okay, in order for us to audible, we have to know what we're audibling away from. Yep. Right? We have to have a reason to change the play. For the Saints last week, because of the communication issues and all of the miscommunication issues, I struggle to believe that it's possible to audible when you don't know where the pressure is coming from and therefore don't know what you're audibling to. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You kind of have to know what you're audibling away from before you can audible, and the Saints didn't have that foundational point to begin with in this game.
Yeah, and that just comes with time, with experience, with just really time in this offense and learning how, this offensive line works. Because, again, Jameis was here last year. The dude before him was here for years, it felt like, and just knew what to do. And I think we all kind of agree that when the guys, when Quan Alexander, Davenport, Lattimore, Chauncey Gardner are healthy, this defense is set. Okay, that's going to carry us to, whatever our record ends up being. The offense, we had some concerns about going into the season. And, with that, time will tell us where this offense really is. So,
yeah.
Really interesting couple of weeks for sure. The highs of Green Bay and then, really back to earth with the Panthers. Do you have a prediction in mind here, Ross? Give me one guy offensively and defensively you're looking forward to seeing who could stand out and really help this team out Sunday.
Oh, on the offensive side, I look forward to seeing Marquez Callaway. I think he'll have the chip stacked against him because there's going to be good safety play in Cleveland, in Foxborough, and there's going to be good cornerback play in Foxborough with J.C. Jackson there. So I'm looking forward to seeing him. I think that ultimately this game plan comes taking advantage of the fact that New England is 24th when it comes to efficiency against the run, EPA against the run. So I think it becomes a big Alvin Kamara game plan. But I'm looking forward to seeing Marquez Callaway try to have have a get-right game, if you will. On the defensive side, I'll go back to C.J. Gardner-Johnson if he's healthy enough to play, which I hope that he will be. He seemed to believe that he was going to be, tweeting immediately after the game, "Oh, I see y'all missed me already. I'm going to be back soon, though." So I think he expects to be back on the field on Sunday. I love CD, man. So I think he expects to be back on the field on Sunday. We'll see how the practice week goes for him, though. But if he's healthy, I'm looking forward to seeing him on the field with Dennis Allen, using him as a disruptor against a rookie quarterback. I think that will be a very fun role to watch him fill.
Yeah, I think for me it's going to be... I'm going to cheat here. I'm picking the 2 tackles, Ron Armstead and Ryan Ramczyk, have a much better game on the edge when you line up against, Matt Judon, Kyle Van Noy.
Who did not participate in practice, by the way.
Oh, really? Today?
On Wednesday.
Or Wednesday,
yeah. We'll see, how his week progresses, but he was not at practice on Wednesday.
So I think, for those 2 tackles can be on point, have a really good game on the edge. I think that just opens up everything for Jameis when it comes to this passing game or, the outside run game with Kamara. So we'll see how that goes. And defensively, I'm going to go... I almost want to say Malcolm Jenkins because he's had a really good first 2 weeks of the season. And I think, the bread and butter, if you will, for, this Mac Jones-led offense is going to be the play of, Hunter Henry and Gianna Smith. And I would expect if it is Zach Bond, actually it doesn't matter if it's Pete Warner or Zach Bond at linebacker. I think Jenkins will have to step up to try and help out and contain these tight ends. So I'll say Malcolm Jenkins is my guy this week.
I think it's a good pick.
Yeah, go with Malcolm because him and Marcus Williams, to me, it's one of the best safety duos in the NFL right now.
Marcus Williams, just to shout him out real quick, has been phenomenal so far this season.
We've been on this wave.
I am so happy.
Since Minneapolis. The moment it happened, we've been on the wave of Marcus Williams.
Alec, look, I love a lot of things. I love a lot of things.
Yeah.
But the thing I probably love most is not looking like an idiot. And there's a risk when you really go to bat for a player that is being publicly dragged because of their play. And there's a risk that you go out there and everyone sees what you're just kind of refusing to see, as opposed to you seeing something that they're not seeing.
I know this, Ross. I was the Patrick Robinson fan bandwagon.
I wasn't going to talk about it.
Des Bryant. Yes, yeah.
All of that. But so it is so refreshing right now to see how just fantastic. I counted at least 5 plays in the first half of the Carolina game for New Orleans where Marcus Williams took away Sam Darnold's first read, which was down the field. They were looking to go after New Orleans. Usually at the beginning, we've covered this team together over the course of the last 2 or 3 seasons over at, All Saints Considered, Sexy 600, all that. And we used to always, where were we at this point in the season? We were always talking about the New Orleans Saints being the leader or amongst the lead in most 20-plus or 40-yard plays given up on the defensive side.
Yeah, life was rough back then.
Life was rough. And now we're not talking about that because this defense has not given that up. They've had some 20-yard plays they've given up. They had the big 32-yard play against Christian McCaffrey, but we're talking catch and run at that point, as opposed to blown coverages and 40-yard air yard passes, right? So, it's a very different convention now, and I'm very glad to see it. And I'm glad for Marcus Williams, who, is on a franchise tag and has the opportunity to get a huge contract next year.
Pay the man. That's all I got to say.
That's it.
The moment the kid talked to the media after the game, I thought, okay, we're fine. He's going to be good. Because, it takes a lot for an athlete to do that after being on the wrong end of arguably, one of the biggest plays in NFL history.
Right.
Yeah. So, Ross, before we go, we know Mike Triple put out a great piece on Jimmy Graham this Wednesday morning talking about, how the trade went down in New Orleans, his thoughts and feelings about the Saints, Champagne, and Drew Brees. They seem to all clear the air now. And, I think he came out and said, one of the biggest what-ifs or regrets is what could have been with Drew Brees.
Yeah.
So just kind of fantasize for a minute. How do you think it would have been had this team had Jimmy Graham, in 2017, in 2018? Just imagine real quick. How do you think that would have turned out?
I mean,
do we have a ring?
2017, Dan Arnold doesn't drop a pass in the end zone in a playoff game.
Sheesh. You just came out and said. But you're not wrong. You're not wrong.
Yeah, Jimmy Graham.
Yeah.
2020, instead of Jimmy Graham making a phenomenal one-handed catch at the end of the Chicago Bears playoff game, maybe he's making that catch for the New Orleans Saints.
To secure Mitch the MVP.
Absolutely. Yes, right. Exactly. Exactly. 2018, you're in the red zone. So instead of that pass going to Tommy Lee, no, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to go there. But I think that there is like value because remember the New Orleans Saints tried forever to get that tight end position
filled,
right? Mm-hmm. Kobe Fleener, Ben Watson on the second stint coming back, Dan Arnold for a little while, Jared Cook. We could talk about all the things that would have been different with Jared Cook last year if it was still Jimmy Graham. You know what I mean? But like, there's real value to the idea of like, hey, Jimmy Graham maybe wouldn't have been the biggest difference maker at the latter portion of his career, right? Because we're now into like the second part of Jimmy Graham's career.
The twilight years.
Yeah, you know what I mean? And that's not disrespectful to him. It's just he's been in the league that long now. Yes, we're all that old. And so I don't think that he becomes, he continues to be the world beater that he was when he was almost your franchise's first ever 100-yard receiver, 100 catch receiver in a season. You know what I mean? Where he was almost that guy, and then I became Michael Thomas for 3 years.
Almost got tagged as a wide receiver too.
Right. So I don't know that he continues to be that, but certainly all those tight end issues that the Saints experienced over the years look massively different if it's Jimmy Graham, as long as he's staying healthy. And as long as he's, continuing to have some kind of an impact. I think eventually we would still be talking about him right now as the second tight end, right? Yep. Like over the course of time, but it would have put the Saints in a very different situation in key moments of like those playoff runs, those playoff appearances and things like that, where he could have had an impact.
I could not agree more. It's crazy. It's crazy how all that went down too. That day in 2015, how that just shocked everyone.
Right. I still can't believe they traded Mans while he was flying a plane.
He is an avid flyer, so I mean,
I guess there's more opportunities to trade him while he's flying a plane than there are. Right?
The hazard, the value goes down when he's on the plane. Right. So, just one side note, y'all won't admit it, but y'all miss Jared Cook. I know you guys do. Yeah, well, you guys won't admit it.
Wow.
I'm just saying. I have not been impressed with Trotman whatsoever. Give me Juwan Johnson. That's my new guy.
I think that there's an expectation factor that goes into
with
Troutman.
Yeah.
That might have been a little unfair for him.
Yeah, because I mean, the guy was a seventh round. Was he?
No, he was a third round selection. So I don't think it's really about like draft stat. Was he third or fourth? Now I'm confused myself. But he was a late second day. No, yeah, he was a third round selection because the Saints traded entirely out of the fourth day to get him.
Yes,
out of the third day to get him.
Yes, you are correct.
So he was a third round selection, and so yeah, I think that that does or doesn't factor in, right? Like that's still a good draft position, and you still expect rounds 1, 2, and 3 to eventually become contributors on a team, and it just so happened that Adam Troutman got to his opportunity pretty quickly, and he performed well last year. But he performed well last year in games where you had, Emmanuel Sanders and Jared Cook, other people to kind of take the attention away. Of course, Michael Thomas when he was available outside of the last 3 games of the season. So you had him, you saw him make plays in situations where he wasn't. Where somebody else was the major focus.
But now he is.
Now, I wouldn't even say that he's the focus on the offense, but I mean, now you've got one weapon, one proven weapon on the offense right now, and that is Alvin Kamara. And it makes it a little bit, it condenses the field, or it doesn't condense the field. It makes it so that, more players are available because you're not putting two people on Michael Thomas or shading over some extra deep safety looks for Emmanuel Sanders, and you're not playing closer to the line of scrimmage and loading the 8-man box for Alvin Kamara. Like, defenses are playing the Saints differently this year, and that's going to take time for Adam Troutman and the Saints to get used to.
Yep, I could not agree more with that. I think that's to wrap this up, Ross. That was phenomenal Saints podcasting.
So much fun, man.
It's always been fun talking with you. It's a blast. This guy.
Day one, man. Day one. We were out here, so I appreciate you, man.
Of course, I appreciate you even more. But that's the new things from here, guys. Make sure you give Ross a follow at Ross Jackson Nola. Make sure you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts at. Leave that 5-star review. And more importantly, follow us on Twitter at Saints FPC. So, Ross, once again, man, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it as always. A true gentleman.
Absolute pleasure, my friend. Absolute pleasure.
And that's going to wrap things up, guys. Make sure to tune in next week. We'll have our Patriot game breakdown. And hopefully it goes a lot better than last week.